Hello and welcome back to the ILTV News Podcast. I'm Maayan Hoffman, Executive Editor of ILTV News, and I'm so glad to see our viewers and listeners. I have with me today a very interesting guest coming all the way from Texas in the United States, Pastor Trey Graham, who happens to also be the ILTV News Christian correspondent. Welcome, Trey. Great to see you. You too. So I want to get started by talking about the news. You know, you have a lot of different hats, and one of those hats is obviously journalist. The Gaza war has been going on now for the better part of 22 months, coming on 23, and there's a lot of pressure obviously mounting on Israel. What do you think needs to happen next with the war, you know, for Israel, of course, and for the region?
In my opinion, Israel needs to do the all of the above approach, and it needs to be maximum effort in multiple lines of effort. And it's hard to do many things at a max level, but max level diplomatically, the lies that will be told at the UN General Assembly that's coming in September, you've got to fight against it diplomatically. The military strategy that needs to be developed to defeat Hamas, the continuing to locate and set up rescue operations for hostages, whether that is through diplomatic efforts, which it's unlikely, or rescue operations. So you've got to get hostages home. You've got to defeat an enemy that is not going away and will not quit. You've got to fight against a diplomatic war that you're facing. And you've got to do all of these things all at the same time. And so you feel that the war should just keep going on until we've effectively beaten Hamas? The worst day in Israel's history was October 7th of 2023. The worst day ever would be if it happened again. Yeah. Hamas is not going away. They want to do October 7th again. Mm-hmm. They say it openly. So, yes, the military operation has to continue. Now, you're fighting an ideology. You're not fighting an army. And that ideology continues to expand every generation. And people say things like, well, when you kill one terrorist, you breed 5 more. Mm-hmm. And it's true. And that's why this is such a long effort so far, and why it will continue to be such a long effort. But the mowing the grass philosophy that you all know about and heard about before October 7th, that's not in play right now. This is a defeat of an enemy because the enemy is not going to surrender, and they want to do October 7th again. Yeah, I mean, I want to, jump over a little bit to, your different perspectives. I mentioned at the beginning that you wear several hats. One of them is you are West Point graduates. You're an Army officer, a pastor, an author, a radio host. I made a list here. I mean, tell me a little bit about how all of these different experiences feed into the way that you see Israel today. Relationship. Well, it allows me to have lots of friends in lots of arenas, whether it's politicians or pastors or rabbis or news people, or I'm involved in sports here in Israel. Mm-hmm. And it allows me to see what Israelis think and how they think in different areas. And many of my Israeli friends are always surprised when I know someone in Israel that they don't know. It's because their circles don't cross, and I'm in both of their circles. Mm-hmm. And so all of these have showed me that this is a place that I care about. It's a place that my family cares about. But it's not just personal, it's professional, it's biblical, it's spiritual, and all of these hats, as you say, that I wear seem different, but they're all connected in my mind, at least. What was your first time in Israel? In 2008, okay. A church member in my congregation gave me the gift of a tour. Oh, wow. And so I came as a member of a tour group. Now, I lead tours, as you know now, but then I had never been to Israel. I came as the member of a tour. My dad came along. He was my roommate, and he'd never been to Israel before, and everything changed. What was it about that first visit that changed everything for you? Well, in the tourism business, we use phrases like the Bible goes from black and white to color, or 2D to 3D, and all of those things are true. But it's more than that. I took 4,000 pictures on that trip because I never knew if I'd ever get back. And we use a lot of graphics in our sermons in our church in Texas, photos and maps and charts and all kinds of things. So we try to bring Israel to Texas if we can't bring Texans to Israel. And what changed was, in Christian lingo, faith became sight.
Wow.
You got to see what you've read about. As a follower of Jesus, you got to see the places where Jesus walked. You got to see where Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. You got to see where Abraham walked and the Valley of Elah where David and Goliath fought a battle. These aren't fairy tales. These are real places. And no one's faith needs sight to believe, but it just deepens your faith. It strengthens your faith. Because you see what you've always read about or learned about is real.
How many times have you come back since that first trip?
I don't know, 40 or 50 times.
It's an incredible number. Incredible number. I've lived here for a number of years, but I think in terms of trips back and forth, it's nowhere near that number of visits. Now you are a pastor, and I'm assuming that not all your congregants in Texas, you're a pastor at Melissa Church in Texas, have made it to Israel. So how do you instill in them a love of Israel or even the importance of Israel, not just politically, but also spiritually?
Well, we are non-Jewish believers in Yeshua, in Jesus, but we know that Jesus, Yeshua, is a Jew, was a Jew, lived on the earth as a Jew. Mm-hmm. The Bible, both parts of it, some call it the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Tanakh and the New Covenant. Those are Jewish books written by Jewish men. So to realize that Israel is the focus, the Jewish people are the focus of the Bible, is to really understand the book. And so our faith comes from, again, a Jewish Messiah, our Savior. And so we believe that our faith is grounded here. Again, there's cliches like the forefathers of the faith and we're the branches and the Jewish people are the root of the tree and all of these things. It's spiritual, but it's also practical. Okay. Because not only do I come here often, but friends of mine from Israel come to our church, like you've been in our church before. So we get to bring Israel to Texas. And once you make friendships with people and you start to have connections with people, it's not distant anymore. It's not theoretical anymore. So we stand with Israel politically because it's the only democracy in the Middle East. It's a rules-based society. It's a law-based society. It's freedom of speech and freedom of religion. So Americans should stand with Israel politically. Civics should lead you to stand with Israel. But beyond that, it's a spiritual thing. This is the homeland of our faith.
Now, you are also the father of 6 children, is that right?
Correct.
How old are your children?
From 14 to 26.
Wow, incredible. And, the younger generation of Christians is different from what I, understand than the older generations. What are you doing to help instill the same love of Israel that you just described in this younger generation in your own children?
You have to keep the story alive. You have to teach the Bible. And when we teach the kids a Bible story, we're going to include a map. Now, it might be a cartoon-looking kids map, but this is where it actually happened. This is the spot where David fought Goliath, or Elijah called down the fire from heaven, or whatever Bible story you might be teaching kids. You're going to teach them that it's a real place. Mm-hmm. Again, it's not a fairy tale. But as they get older, I help my kids, whether they were in high school or in college, when they write their papers, to be very open, very clear. They're allowed to use Bible verses. They're allowed to stand up for what they believe. And if they had a teacher or a professor who said they weren't allowed, I would tell them they were allowed.
Wow.
You're allowed to say these things. We have something called the Constitution. We have the freedom of speech. And if a teacher or a professor ever said you're not allowed to use the Bible, it's not true. It's not real. Say what you believe. Stand up for what you believe. So it's keeping the story alive. It's passing the baton. It's Deuteronomy 6. Teach it to your children when you lie down, when you rise up, when you go by the way, and when you're at your house. It's instilling in them what's important to you.
Now, there is really such a struggle in the United States. I mean, we certainly are seeing it on the college campuses with all of the mass protests, pro-Hamas protests and anti-Israel, anti-Semitic protests that are taking place. But even in Texas, which is a Republican state, a red state, has generally been a very pro-Israel state, just in the last several months, there have been a number of incidents. One that really stands out is when the government and the municipality in Texas canceled the conference for the Israel guys, a group of Christians that live mostly here in Israel. They kind of live in both, and were putting on this pro-Israel, pro-Judea and Samaria event. Mm-hmm. And extremists in Texas had come out and threatened the event, and then they decided to shut it down for fear that there would be an escalation. Why is that happening in a place like Texas? How is it happening in a place like Texas?
First of all, Texas is changing. The whole world is moving to Texas. All of America is moving to Texas.
Good property tax, I understand, right?
Well,
good living.
Lots of states have raised their taxes, and their states are broke, and they're moving to a state that functions. Uh-huh. So a lot of people are moving to Texas, and they move their values to Texas. But it's not the majority of Texans. I don't believe it's the majority in any state. You've got a very vocal minority who are willing to use threats of violence, actual violence. You've got people who are confused. You talked about the protests on the college campuses. I guarantee you these people have never been to Israel.
Yeah.
One of the jokes was they couldn't find Gaza on a map of Gaza. They don't know who they're talking about. They've bought into the oppressor and victim ideology, and the victim class identifies with the Palestinian movement. The victim class incredibly identifies with Hamas, who are murderous, barbaric terrorists. And yet, if you don't know anything, it's the latest craze, it's the latest fad to jump in on. And there is a minority, and it's a minority, again, that's willing to use violence. Yeah. And that conference that you were talking about, it was moved several times, and it was a matter of really getting the law enforcement personnel to be comfortable that they were able to secure the event. And I know Mr. Waller and those folks, but I haven't spoken to them about what actually went down. But my assumption is that they were in consultation with the law enforcement personnel, and they could not come to a confident security plan for the event.
Yeah, that was my understanding. I did speak to them shortly after, and they said that it was really a combination of issues, that there was all this pressure. The law enforcement felt nervous. They said either you're going to have to find some way to add a lot of private security, or we don't feel comfortable to secure the event. But that's striking, again, in a state like Texas and in America at large.
But that's emblematic of the problem. A few loud, angry, hateful people imposing their will on everybody else. Yeah. If you want to stand with Hamas, do so. But why can't other people stand with Judea and Samaria? Why are you allowed to stand for what you believe in, but you refuse to allow anyone else to stand for what they believe in? Yeah. Why do you have the right to shout it and to threaten it out? Make your case. Make your argument. But let them make theirs as well.
And, on that note, in terms of making your argument or political sides, I mean, the winds of Washington can change very quickly. Currently, of course, we have U.S. President Donald Trump in the White House. He's certainly got a large evangelical Christian backing and a right of center backing, conservative, as we'd call it in the United States, backing. A lot of faith and values there, and definitely pro-Israel. But in a few years, you're going to have another election, and it could go the other way around. And we saw what happened under the Biden administration. Is there any concern that when you're seeing things like this already creep up in states like Texas, that in a few years, if the White House shifts, that this could be widespread across the whole United States?
It's a growing problem no matter who's in the office.
Okay.
But what you're showing is the importance of legislating.
Okay.
Mr. Biden was notorious for it, and Mr. Trump is notorious for it, and they're called executive orders.
Yes.
And when the party switches, they issue a whole new set of executive orders, which are just do the opposite of what that guy did.
Yeah.
And then the next guy comes and do just opposite of what he did. And so those are in effect as long as that person's in office. So you need to make laws. You need to pass legislation. And this has to do with support for Israel, but it has to do with so many other things. Executive orders are limited and they're temporary, and presidents love them because they sign a piece of paper and it's over.
Right, it just moves fast.
It's quick, and they don't have to convince Congress to do anything.
Right.
But it's temporary. And so the Republicans have all three levels of government right now: House, Senate, and White House.
Right.
There's a midterm coming up a year from now. But depending on what happens in the midterm, the pro-Israel crowd, the conservative crowd, needs to work together in Congress to get laws passed because those are long-standing.
Yeah. Very hard to revoke a law, you're right, as opposed to an executive order, which the next day the new
just
president,
turns
as
it
you
over.
say, can just turn it right over. Now, Donald Trump is back in the White House. Obviously, this is his second go with this. And in the first rounds, he certainly was very supportive of the state of Israel. There were many changes that he made to support Israel, whether it was moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing the Golan Heights, and the list, of course, goes on. Now we've seen him in office for a little over 8 months. What would you say he's really done correctly so far? What is he doing right for the state of Israel at this time in this administration?
I think he is supporting the prime minister, Mr. Netanyahu. I think he is giving him freedom of movement, freedom of decision, though I think that's an interesting topic we should talk about at some point. Is I don't think America should have veto power over Israel's decisions.
100%.
But he's giving support. He's giving freedom of movement. The green light is what everyone likes to call it. Of course, Ambassador Huckabee is a Bible-believing Christian, and he's standing with Israel from a biblical perspective. So appointing him is important. Other members of the cabinet, Marco Rubio as well, J.D. Vance and others, similar to Nikki Haley and those from the first term, Mike Pence, again, another strong Bible-believing Christian. So Mr. Trump was never a politician. He did not grow up in politics like all the other presidents who were a congressional page, and then they were an intern, and then they were a state house member, and they were every level of government that you can find. Trump has been elected to one office in his whole life, and that's the President of the United States twice. So he doesn't know and never knew all of the intricacies of why you could or could not do things. So he is a man who makes decisions from his gut. He makes decisions really in simple logic. That seems dumb. That seems smart. Why are we going to continue that? Or let's do it that way. And I assume that's what he would say made him successful in the business world. But what has he done? He's not bought into things like you can't call Judea and Samaria, Judea and Samaria. Why can't you? He doesn't know that 100 years or 77 years of diplomacy that says you shouldn't use those terms. So what has he done right? He's allowed people who stand with Israel to be placed in important positions, and he stood with Israel diplomatically, militarily. Standing against Iran was huge. And I think he's going to continue to do so because I think the people around him are pushing him that way.
Yeah, and it was just 100 days, this week of U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee's term here. He took office a couple months after Trump was elected. And
he had to get Senate confirmed, which takes a while.
Takes a while, right. Yeah. And so when that happens, since then there's been a number of real big wins he was highlighting. And as you said, Iran was one of them, that America really stood by Israel and went ahead and, destroyed really a lot of Iran's nuclear program. Unfortunately, we're probably not done with that, but at least, it obviously had some tremendous impact. Now, in terms of, the White House, is there anything that you feel that it has failed at so far, that it's not done good enough when it comes to Israel?
Well, I mentioned it a moment ago. As an American citizen, as a former member of the U.S. Army, I'm a patriot for my country. Mm-hmm. I'm a lover of Israel also. I do not believe American presidents, American officials should have veto power over Israeli decisions. We should stand by Israel and stand with Israel. But it's not our decision as Americans. It's not the White House's decision about how you go into Gaza, what your military strategy should be. I know the American military, U.S. Army generals are here often in consultation, and that's great. But U.S. Army generals and U.S. government officials should not be making the decisions for Israel's policies. So, again, we talked about the green light or the red light.
Right.
I think we have to allow this country to make its own decisions.
You think America is making our military decisions?
I don't think so, but I think the threat is always out there. I think the fear on Israel's part is always out there. Am I going to get a green light or a red light on this issue? I wish Israel didn't have to have that hesitancy. Just make the best decision that you can and let America stand with you.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about the hostage deal? I mean, Steve Witkoff, who's the special envoy, has been back and forth so many times. Qatar, there's been talks. We're always on the cusp of a deal. But there hasn't been another deal, obviously, for many, many months. And here we are getting ready to really take over Gaza City. Then Hamas acts like maybe they are going to sign a deal. Now it's in Israel's court again. But it's really hard at this stage to believe that there will be any reality to those talks. What has been so hard if America is as strong as it is and with all the successes that Trump has had? I mean, why is there not a hostage deal?
Remember who Hamas is. They are Iran. What has Iran done for decades in their nuclear aspirations? Pursue their goal and delay anything that would cause them to stop.
Right.
Kick the can down the road is the phrase. Okay. Delay, delay, delay. And while they are delaying and say, I'll negotiate with you next year, or I'll negotiate with you next year, they are pursuing their nuclear endeavors. That's what was happening prior to June of this year. Yeah. So that's who Hamas is. We will negotiate next week or next month. And Hamas, as much as they are murderous barbarians, are genius level at negotiation. Because here's what happens.
Okay.
Mr. Witkoff or the Qataris or someone else will draft a proposal.
Yeah.
The Israelis will look at it and not like it, but realize it's better than zero. It's the same story as the UN partition plan in 1947. It's not good for Israel, but it's better than nothing.
Correct.
So Israel will say yes. Hamas will receive the document, and they say, we're going to make slight adjustments. And slight adjustments to them means they turn everything upside down.
Right. We won't give you all the hostages. You have to pull completely out and not have any safety or security.
They're not slight adjustments. They're reversals.
Right.
And now we'll sign this. And they give it back to Israel, and Israel says, I can't agree to that. And what does the media say?
Israel
Hamas says yes, Israel says no.
Yeah, of course.
Hamas will never agree to release the hostages. Never.
Yeah.
They'll never let the last hostage out because that is their insurance policy, their life insurance policy. Yeah. That is the only thing keeping them alive today is the fact that they have hostages.
Yeah.
So why hasn't it happened yet? I mean, you're a bright person and you got bright people on your show. No one knows how exceedingly complex this is militarily. Yeah. No one understands that they're being held underground and they're being held in horrific conditions, and they're moved anytime that there's an approach of the IDF. They're going to be moved again. They're used as human shields. Why have they not been rescued? Because to try to rescue them without harming them limits your military options. And Israel has erred on the side, I would say rightfully so, erred on the side to not conduct operations that might endanger the hostages even more. And Hamas is going to do their best to keep that technique alive, that they are not going to release hostages voluntarily because that is the end of their existence, and they know that.
And you speak with such clarity about this terrorist organization, but it is true that even within the Christian right, or the evangelical Christian community, certainly the MAGA community, we're starting to hear a lot of voices that are becoming much softer, much more pro the Palestinian cause, despite everything that you just described. You know, you've got the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and such. How are these people creeping in? And is this a fear that, you know, next year, instead of having a Trey Graham to speak to, we might be speaking to somebody like that?
Well, you named a whole bunch of buzzwords and subgroups there, and I don't know that there's automatic overlap with all of those subgroups. But you ask about why do Christians support the Palestinian cause? Sadly, they're misinformed. It's noble to support those who are suffering. Yeah. And if you believe the media narrative that the people in Gaza are suffering, then it's noble, it's human to feel sorry for them. But if you're not educated to realize that they're suffering because of their own leadership, they're suffering because of Hamas. Are there people suffering in Gaza? Yes. Is that the fault of Israel? No. That's the fault of the people, number one, who've oppressed their own people for almost 20 years since they took power.
2007.
Again, you're smart. You know these things, that you spent how many billions of dollars of aid on concrete to build tunnels. And you built exactly 0 bomb shelters in Gaza. Right. Because your desire was not to protect your own people. Your desire was to protect your own terrorists. Yeah. So when you see people suffering, it's human. It's natural to feel sorry for them. But don't jump to the conclusion that that must be Israel's fault, because the facts don't bear that out.
And you think that people like Tucker Carlson are seeing that and are misinformed? Or do you think that they might be somewhat anti-Semitic, or maybe even potentially just wanting to keep it internal and get America out of these wars in the Middle East?
Well, I'm not going to ascribe motives to any certain person, but anti-Semitism is always a problem. In every conversation, anti-Semitism is a problem. Both willing and overt anti-Semitism and covert anti-Semitism. It's always a problem. There is an isolationist lane in America. And you mentioned that I was in the Army, and you mentioned, I have 3 kids in the United States Army.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So nobody wants to go to war less than a soldier does, is what I used to tell people. But I think now I tell people no one wants to go to war less than the parents of soldiers, okay? And that's true of the American Army. It's true of the Israeli Army here. Yeah. So there's an isolationist wing, and that has value. But leadership has responsibility. Influence has responsibility. And when there is evil in the world, someone has to stand up against that evil. And isolationism cannot be a hard and fast rule, or the bad guys will win.
So, Trey, we are really out of time today. So I think just for, one final thought, if you could send me a 10, 15-second message to our viewers, both in Israel and abroad, what is that last message of hope that you want to deliver to people after kind of a complicated conversation?
Well, spiritually, God made a promise. He promised one people, one land for an everlasting covenant. I don't get to change that. Politicians don't get to change that. The UN doesn't get to change that. The land of Israel was given to the people of Israel, and we don't get to undo that. So we need to choose what side we're going to be on. And we mentioned earlier that people, I believe, should stand with Israel diplomatically and politically and for civil rights issues and all of these other reasons. But spiritually, I wanted to come to Israel because I'm a follower of Jesus, and this is where Jesus lived and walked and ministered. So my heart is here from a biblical perspective. And if you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, that's the root of your faith, is this place right here. And it's not perfect, and we're not going to claim that it is. Your government is not always right, but they're not always wrong either. And Americans and Christians should do their homework, learn the terminology. And we spend a lot of time in our church talking about this. I think you know that because you've been to our church. Yeah. October 7th was a Saturday morning here. It was a Friday night in Texas. That Sunday morning, I threw away my sermon and did a whole sermon explaining what happened. Who is Hamas? Who are these terrorists? Why do they hate Israel? Why would they attack 85-year-old grandmothers and take them hostage? And that began 17 sermons in a row trying to explain who the players are in this. So you need to learn, ladies and gentlemen. You need to know what's going on because you can see through the lies when you're better informed.
Amazing. Well, Pastor Trey Graham, thank you so much for coming all the way to Texas to do the show.
You're welcome.